Okay, it's 7 o'clock. I will call a meeting of the Winona County Planning Commission to order, and we'll start out with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, has everybody had a chance to read over their agenda? Is there anything that you would like changed, or I need a motion?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second. Cherie moves to approve the agenda. Pat seconds it. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The agenda is passed or approved. All right, how about the minutes? Okay, there's one thing, Annie, when she wrote the ones that were in our packet, she put 6. She omitted 6, so she had 7 and 8, for the numbers. And so she just, in the one that I've got here, she just took and backed it off, so she put in 6 instead of 7, and 6 and 7 instead of 7 and 8. If you understand, that would be the only change.
I'd move to approve it with those changes.
Steve moves to approve.
I second.
Vince seconds it. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion to approve the minutes of the May 16th meeting are passed. Okay, we move on to point number 5, petitions. Docket PC 620-19-01. Eric.
Good evening. For this petition, this is to allow a new dwelling to be located within the Agricultural Resource Conservation District on less than 40 acres. And I guess to start this off, as mentioned in the staff report, there was also a variance that the petitioners had to obtain, and they did have that meeting today, and that was approved. There's a couple of points that we'll get into a little bit later in the presentation on that. This property, let's see, that's not the one let's see if I'm going to start out with a couple of overviews that show the type of land. It's a 12-acre parcel that sits north of a township road, and it is entirely woods, and it's a mature stand of woods. There's no evidence of it being farmed in the past. The color aerial also has 2 bars. It's in your packet, and it's showing roughly 1,000-foot setback from the Munt feedlot that's located to the northwest. And that's a larger feedlot, I think, according to December 2018 feedlot registration. That was at about 489 animal units. So that requirement would be 1,000 feet for a new house. And that just shows roughly where 1,000 feet would come to on the raw parcel. The other setback line for reference is illustrating 500 feet, and that is from the Orla Yoder feedlot that has just been registered. That was registered for 21 animal units last month, So the setback for feedlots between 10 and 50 animal units is 500 feet. So that's roughly showing where a 500-foot setback would come in from the southeast on the property. What was, I think, the most important factor this afternoon was the prime soils. And essentially, this map shows the kind of the cream-colored overlay is showing your types 1, 2, and 3, which are considered prime in the Winona County zoning ordinance. So if they divide that approximately right in this location, the entire parcel would be essentially 100% prime according to that. But because of the circumstances and the history and the nature of that track, the Board of Adjustment found that it did not apply in this case. Again, this is showing the prime soil overlay and the vicinity in which they wish to create the new building site. Going back to the survey, this is showing how it would be divided, roughly 6 acres for the new building site on the western portion of that. I believe the survey is not a complete depiction of the entire acreage that you see on there. There is some discrepancy. It was somewhat hard to follow, when I was looking at it. But the goal was to have 6 acres for the son, Christopher, with the new house. And as mentioned in the staff report, he wishes to construct a shop building to start out with, which would also serve as living quarters, and with the intent then to eventually be able to construct a new house slightly to the west. Some of the discussion that the Board of Adjustment had that we were directed to forward to the Planning Commission for consideration is a question about codes, building codes, as far as putting up a shed-like structure for living quarters. And I relayed that Winona County is a non-enforced building code area. However, if they are hiring contractors, they are supposed to be following Minnesota building codes in the state of Minnesota. Specifically, they were talking about snow loads, just the difference between what you'd see for an agricultural structure, versus what would be more used for residential purposes. So it's kind of a welfare safety issue that kind of came up, and they wanted us to make note of that, because if there was conditions placed, they thought the Planning Commission and the County Board would probably be the more appropriate venue for that instead of the variance. Okay, we'll see a quick video on this. We are in section 11 of Saratoga Township, and this is in regards to the August and Christopher Roth petitions. They seek a variance to allow a building site established on a Class 2 soil type instead of the Class 4 through 8. They also seek a conditional use permit to allow a building site on less than 40, in this case, a 6-acre proposed building site. We're currently on Fremont Drive, which is a Saratoga Township road, and essentially I'm looking at a surveyor mark, which would be, according to the one survey site plan, representative of that red line that runs north to south right at the Fremont Drive Township Road. As you can see from this vantage point, the building site would be approximately 300 feet to the north in the wooded area, and roughly 150 feet from that north-south line. I'm not probably going to venture in there. I do not believe the building site is marked, but this video footage should give a pretty good example of what type of vegetation and terrain that we are dealing with. A new driveway would then be created off of the township road somewhere in that vicinity. Since it's a Saratoga Township road, the applicants would be required to contact the township to see what road specifications they would need for that driveway permit. whether or not a culvert would be required or other particular grade or drainage issues that would be associated with it. Again, the building site would be approximately, there's a shop, and then there'd be a home located to the west. I believe the shop would be created first and potentially created originally to be occupied while the new home may be phased in there shortly thereafter. This is the view looking somewhat to the east at the neighbor. That would be the Orla Yoder residence. And they do have a feedlot. And the feedlot officer had met with the applicants, and the appropriate level of registration would represent a 500-foot setback for any new houses that would be built. We also have a Munt feedlot that is located westerly, somewhat to the northwest in that direction, and that is a considerable size feedlot, and that would require a 1,000-foot setback. In this case, the proposed building site was verified to meet those applicable setbacks. Currently, the Roth parcel is about 12 acres, and 6 acres would be designated for Christopher's new building site. If I just walk somewhat a little bit to the east, you can see the existing August Roth residence and garage. You can make it out right in that area with a driveway coming up at that point. Again, the site does not exhibit any agricultural land that has been cultivated or tilled in considerable history. Got mature hardwood deciduous wood cover on it. You're looking to the west. As we pan to the south, it's bordered by alfalfa. And again, on the neighbors. That should conclude the video footage for these applications. One last point, it's mentioned in your staff report, Saratoga Township Board did meet on this petition, and they offered support to both the variance and the conditional use permit application. Any questions on the staff report?
Yeah, I guess I had one. Can you bring up the photo again with the setbacks on it from the feedlots? Can you show me where the parcel is again that they intend to build?
Again, the survey shows 12 acres, and that 12 acres almost looks like it's centered like right this. It's not doing justice, I think, to a good part of the property here and here. But the building site right here is the address of August's residence, and basically that red stake where the survey line was looked to be somewhere like right in this point. So 300 feet, 150 feet in. The best estimate that I could come up with is the building site would be right approximately in this area here.
So does it meet the setback from the feedlot?
Yes, according to
And it's
what I calculated.
it's from,
The house,
yeah,
from wherever the new house would be built,
it's not from the,
not from the property line. The,
isn't one or the, isn't it either the property line of the feedlot or the property line?
no, at one time, before 2011, a new non-farm parcel we required that the setback be 1,000 feet, but then in
From the
2000,
parcel.
from the parcel, but then we made some changes to the setbacks with the revision.
Good.
Yeah, I guess there was, yeah, well, as the petitioners will point out, they did harvest the woods, so there's some small clearing spots in there too, so they'll probably touch on that with their comments.
Eric, I'm a little bit confused here. We have a 40-acre parcel requirement to build a new home without a CUP. But we also have a requirement that you can only have one dwelling on 40 acres, right?
No, that was changed in 2011 as well.
It was changed. Okay.
Any other questions?
Did anything else change in the ordinance?
Quite a bit, if I recall. I think you were there too.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Eric. At this time, would the petitioners like to speak on their behalf? And state your name and address.
Hi, I'm Chris. I live 14910 Fremont Drive, Utica, with my dad as of now.
I'm August Roth, same address, 14910 Fremont Drive, Utica.
Okay.
And the whole plan of me building out there, it's kind of been,
Speak into the microphone.
it's been in the generation for years. The farm, the Munt Dairy, was a third generation farm, and then my dad bought the land, I don't know when, like
82. The 12 acres I purchased in 82.
and we all, us kids grew up on there, and I'm one of the last ones, and I always wanted to overlook my dad or build out there, take over his house, but then his house isn't quite to my standards that's going to be livable for my sense of life. So I wanted to build a new house. And the whole deal with the shop, my wife and I drive semi over the road. So we're building the shop for the semi with a living quarter, not a full house, but just a room to come home to in the shop. And we'll meet all them standards that need to be met for living quarters. We got estimates for the construction and the septic tank. We're going to build big enough for the house and the shop eventually. And I guess if there's anything else you guys have, just ask.
I guess I have a question for council. Now, this isn't going to take 2 permits because we're actually, in essence, building 2 residences here. Are we not?
One permit's what's being sought, it's everything spelled out in the application materials,
It is all spelled out, and that's perfectly legal the way it's spelled out.
as far as I'm aware.
Okay. Okay, is there any questions from planning commission members?
How many square feet is the living quarters that you're building in the shop right now?
Well, the shop's gonna be a 45 by 75, and then there's gonna be like a wall, but like 25 to 30 feet of the living quarter, but it's not gonna be living quarters underneath that 25 to 30 feet. It's only gonna be upstairs, like a loft type. So it'd be like 8-foot ceiling up there, 25, 30 feet by 45 feet.
And then when you build a house, what will become of that?
As in the square footage?
I mean,
Or the shop.
are you seeing it as rental property then, or?
No,
The
it's
living
just more or
quarters?
less just I don't know. I have a big family, 12 siblings, so if we ever have family down, you know, they want somewhere to stay and I don't want them in the house, they can go there.
His wife also has 12 siblings
Yeah.
in her family too. So it's,
So that was a dumb question.
But yeah, I mean, I don't plan on having nothing like that, but one's enough.
like Chris mentioned, it's been in the farm where Jamie Munt lives was my grandfather's and my father's, and then my oldest brother, who went into partnership with Jamie, and then he's retired, and then Jamie currently owns it. It's where my family all grew up, and it's just always been a special to be in the area where you grew up. Chris feels the same way.
Are there any other questions?
Arlie's got one. Don't you? I thought you were, oh. He's just waving his glasses, never mind.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I would entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second. Kelly moves to, for a, to open the public hearing, and Pat seconds it. Is there any discussion on this motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of opening the public hearing for docket number 1, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, the public hearing is now open. Anyone wishing to speak to docket number 1, please step forward, state your name and address into the mic, and say what you have to say. Okay, for the second time, anyone wishing to speak to the docket item number 1, please step forward, state your name and address, and say what you have to say. I guess, I don't know if this is the right time, but was there something that you were supposed to speak about, or?
I was here if anyone had any questions, because the Orla Yoder feedback was kind of controversial in the office, so if anyone had questions, I was here to answer it.
We can talk to staff anytime.
Okay, all right, all right. All right, for the third and final time, if there's anyone wishing to speak to docket item number 1, please step forward, state your name, address, and say what you have to say.
I'll move to close public hearing.
Steve moves to close the public hearing.
Second.
Cherie seconds it. All those in favor of the motion to close the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion to close the public hearing is passed. Okay, at this time, I would ask staff to give us some more details on what she alluded to.
So the Orla Yoder feedlot is a brand new one. They put in their application, and it's a very large size chicken coop. I think it was like 100 by 75 feet. And so I was originally gonna have them do a variance, because for capacity, that's what we usually permit on, was over the 50 animal units, so it would have been a 1,000-foot setback. So when Ross originally applied, they applied for a second variance from a feedlot. But what they were saying they were gonna put in it was only 5,000 chickens versus what the MPCA would consider capacity would be 16 to 23,000 chickens. And so it was kind of controversial. I had to fish out who they were producing for the egg laying, and they're doing organic, and based on organic standards, it's 1.5 square feet per chicken versus the 0.38 square feet that the MPCA requires. So it brought the animal unit numbers down below 50 based on what the producer requires as stocking capacity goes to. And I know that a neighboring property was not happy about us allowing that to go on with the less than 500-foot setback. So that's kind of what I was here to answer any questions about, if anyone had anything.
No, you lost me on the neighbor and the not happy about the 500-foot setback. Was that from the chicken house or that's from the new house?
The chicken coop. It's on the other side of the property, so I know that.
But that has nothing to do with this one.
Nothing to do with this one.
Okay. You got that cleared up then. Thank you.
So,
Steve,
yeah.
you got a question?
Yeah. I guess I don't understand how being organic or not organic has influences the number of animal. I mean, an animal unit is defined in our ordinance, right?
An animal unit is defined in our ordinance, but based on, so it's the same amount of animal units per bird, but the amount of space each bird needs is more for organic. And so based on capacity, I would have originally permitted it as 50 and above, because it could have been up to 80 animal units, but based on my conversations with the MPCA and what they recommended, and my conversation with who Orla is producing for, their capacity was 1.5. The U.S. standard for organic, for laying chickens, is 1.5 square feet per bird, whereas the MPCA for conventional farming is 0.38 square feet per bird. So it made the capacity of the building less, so the building can hold less chickens based on the organic capacity standards.
Chickens don't have much
It's
room.
bigger, fewer animals, fewer birds for organic.
Because they have more space. It's the same square footage, but they have less space. I don't know if I'm explaining that. It's kind of confusing.
Yes. I'm following all that. The applicant, didn't they come in with the feedlot and say, we want to be approved for so many animal units?
They came in to do a development certificate, because under 50 animal units, we don't require a feedlot permit. But I looked at the development certificate, and based on the square footage and not knowing all the details behind it, I said they would need a feedlot permit and a variance because they're within 1,000 feet of the neighboring properties. But based on them being organic and the organic standards made it so they did not need a variance or a feedlot permit. They just need to be registered.
Because the concentration of animals wasn't there. You were going based upon the size of the facility, and what most people that weren't doing organic would put it, the numbers, the concentration of animals that would be in there. That's what she was thinking was gonna be in there, but since they're doing organic, the requirements are less concentration of animals.
Correct.
Okay. It just seems,
Yeah. Whoops.
So there's excess space?
So there's 1.5 square feet per bird.
Right.
So,
The total square footage,
yes.
it matches up for what?
Yes, I permitted for the capacity of the building.
Okay.
So he said 5,000, the capacity was 5,200. So that's what I permitted it for, based on their spacing recommendations.
Now, Steve, did you have a follow-up question? I'm sorry I interrupted.
it just, I guess, seemed reverse of how we usually do it. Usually the applicant says, this is what I want to be approved for. In this case, the applicant came in and said, this is how much space I have, how many animals can I put in it?
Well, no, so a feedlot comes in to build, they do the development certificate, and they tell me how big it's gonna be. They always have a site plan. And based on that site plan, I come up with the number. There's a MPCA animal capacity calculator on their website, and I use that based on which animal type they're having. And then, so the registration is based on how many animals they currently have in there, but when I permit a new one, it's based on capacity. It's not based on what they tell me they're putting in there. So it's like, that goes a lot with like swine facilities. So when a swine facility tells me they're only gonna put 2,400 in there, and then I look and they have 2,700 crates, I'm gonna permit them for 2,700 crates, not 24.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I was wondering if we could move on, because this is not relevant to the CUP that is on the table here. And if there are additional questions on that CUP, maybe they could be handled in a different venue, but it's not relevant to what we're talking, what's in front of us right now. If we
Okay,
could,
is that agreeable with the rest of the planning commission?
thank you.
Okay. All right, is there any questions, comments on the CUP application we have in front of us? Do we want to proceed with the findings of fact? Okay, since we had controversy over last month's handling of the findings of fact, we don't have to go through every one of them, but I'm gonna start with number one, and either you question it or you hold your peace, because we're not gonna sit around and waste time for you to think of something. So number one, does anyone have anything they want to say?
I would agree with staff analysis on this.
Okay, Cherie says she agrees with staff analysis. Number two. Number three.
17.
Seventeen of the packet, 7 of the evaluation.
Number four. Well, if nobody else has anything they want to say about this, this is the one that bothers me the most. Because I know of several instances where people have been penalized for sod busting, and a couple instances where they've been penalized for clearing timberland that was basically prime soil, but was timber. And so I'm wondering, and I guess I will ask council, are we creating another loophole, or I don't know what the right word is?
Do you mean precedent? Are we creating?
Yeah.
This can happen again? As we've talked about during numerous trainings and has been mentioned during our meetings before, each petition should be evaluated on its own merits and whether or not the findings are met for that particular parcel. We're not based on precedence of what you do on one petition unless you're dealing with exactly the same thing, almost identical parcels, exactly the same conditions on another petition. There shouldn't be any issues with precedence. Every petition needs to be evaluated on its own merits and the unique characteristics of the property.
Okay. So, is everybody in agreement to number 4 then?
I'd like to comment. It sounds like they're going to select cut. They're not going to clear cut the woods.
Yeah, it was just logged like 3 years ago, so there's not too many trees to take down. If the video shows, it looks like it's real thick on the road line, but inside the woods, there's quite a bit of areas where we're gonna keep as many trees as we can.
So there was some selective cutting a few years ago,
Yes.
but not clear cutted. It's still timber there. And it's a 45 by 75 foot structure, so there'll be a road. Will you be able to make use of the areas that's already been
Yep.
harvested?
The trail that goes in will hardly take any trees down, and then where the shop is going, there's only like maybe 5 trees that we're gonna take down. Besides, I mean, there's little stuff.
Saplings?
Yeah, but 5 big ones that are worth anything for the shop. The house, we're not gonna touch any of that woods until we come to that point.
So the trees have already been taken.
So, number 5. Number 6. Number 7. Number 8. Number 9. Number 10. Okay, do you want to have a motion on the findings of fact, or do you want to go to include the conditions?
Include the conditions.
Okay, is that agreeable? All right, the conditions. The owners of the property to which the conditional use permit is issued will abide by all representations and commitments made during the permitting process as well as before the planning commission, in accordance with all conditions to the conditional use permit, taken as a whole or as approved by the planning commission and the county board. It should be recommended by the planning commission. Number 2, the petitioners obtain the required development certificate, septic permit, and comply with all relevant regulations and standards of Winona County and the state of Minnesota. And at this point, I would like to question, does that have anything to do with, is there going to be a new well, or is this going to be a continuation of the existing well?
I was planning to get a new well drilled. I was gonna pull water from my dad's, but I think it's best if I just do my own.
Now, does you have to say that in the mic, or? Okay. Now, is this supposed to be in the condition then, or
It's in the body.
where is it?
It's in there. On page 3.
Yeah, but is that
I don't know.
sufficient, or Stephanie, should that be in the conditions too, or?
It kind of is already, because on number 2, it says, the petitioners obtain the required development certificate, septic permit and comply with all relevant regulations and standards of Winona County and the state of Minnesota. Wouldn't that cover it?
It should, yes.
Okay.
Okay. The proposed new driveway shall adhere to the standards described in Chapter 9.7 of the Winona County zoning ordinance, and a driveway access permit shall be acquired from Saratoga Township if required. The owners of the property shall allow Winona County staff to inspect the property annually or as necessary to evaluate compliance with the variance issued.
Mr. Chair, I would like to tweak that one to evaluate compliance with the permit issued. I copied and pasted the variance application, is that correction?
Okay, does everybody understand
Yep.
what you said? Okay. All right, there's no objections or comments on the conditions? Is there any others that someone feels they would like to add? Okay. Is there any other discussion? Okay, I need to hear a motion. Well, don't all jump. Vince moves that we approve the CUP recommendation for docket number 1 with the findings of fact as noted and the following 4 conditions. Is that right, Vince?
Yes.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, Lynn seconds. All right, any other discussion? Now, Arlie, don't fall asleep on me here.
Being quiet, right?
All right, all in favor of recommending the approval to the county board of docket number 1, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, the recommendation is passed, and so it will go to the county board. You understand this procedure? All right, somebody will explain it to you if you don't. All right, let's see.
Do we need to address this at all?
Not yet.
Okay.
Let's see, we got to go back to our agenda. Where we got that? New petitions, is this? All right. All right,
I don't see an agenda. I don't see an agenda. I mean, I saw it in that.
I guess number 6 is the next thing we need, right? Who's supposed to be on the,
I can start with that. Number 6 is pertaining to township acknowledgement notification process. The Township Officers Association had recommended at a previous meeting of theirs that we address township acknowledgement forms and the notification process when a petition, either for a variance or a conditional use permit, is located on the boundary of a township. This kind of stemmed from a petition we had last year that was on the boundary of Hillsdale and Warren, I believe, townships, and it was in Hillsdale. So our ordinance and what we require is that it's that Hillsdale Township is notified. It's the township where the petition is taking place, and that the petitioner goes to their board meeting and has them fill out and make a recommendation that gets recorded on the township acknowledgement form. Warren Township therefore did not get notified because it's not required, but they wished to be notified, and it came to their attention. A property owner in Warren Township, a neighbor to the petitioner, was upset and had concerns about the petition and went to Warren Township. And so anyways, out of that process, they went through their channels with the Township Association, and the Township Supervisors Association made a recommendation that asked the county to look at our notification process. So we did that, and we came up with some changes that would accommodate that for your consideration. It was pretty simple. There was 2 items in the notification process that address township acknowledgement form. In the section for conditional use permits and planning commission.
It's in your packet on page 39.
39?
Page 39. I have it right here. Yeah, so as we were looking at it, though, it got a little bit bigger because we noticed in the variance section under the Board of Adjustment, the notification process there was missing. And so this really stems from state statute. And so we notify it the same way for the Planning Commission and the Board of Adjustment. But the language itself wasn't in the Board of Adjustment section, so I added that. So that's what you'll see here under procedure. And then we changed the township acknowledgement form requirement. So essentially, what it says is that the planning department will notify when a petition is on the border of a township. They will notify both townships of the petition. And then we also require the petitioner to then go to the neighboring township. So they're having to go to a second, and if there's 3 potentially townships, there'd be 3 meetings that they'd have to go to and have each township consider the petition and fill out a township acknowledgement form with a recommendation.
Or potentially 4.
Potentially 4, I suppose, that could potentially happen.
And anyone who lives in the corner,
Where they all connect, yeah.
so now the petitioner has to.
Go to 4 meetings.
I got one the other day of that solar farm coming up from the solar company. Our township is right on the line. I mean, the road is the line. So they must be.
Yeah, we did, I think Eric or whoever was working with the solar company had probably mentioned that was a request of the townships, and so they voluntarily did that. And it's interesting because the acknowledgement forms that came back, one is from the township is a recommendation for support, and the other one is for denial. So so now you guys are going to be in the position of taking those. You have 2 township acknowledgement forms with differing recommendations, so you'll have to take those and take them for what they're worth. They are only recommendations; they're non-binding. But you can see how that could just add a little bit, just another layer of, consideration, I guess, for you guys. So I guess, I mean, if you have questions or comments at this time, I mean, that's what we're looking for, is just a discussion on the item. And then also, that will lead to, if you wish to make a recommendation to, or pass a motion to schedule a public hearing if you so chose.
The adjacent townships will be notified. Where does the prospective or possible landowners distance on that? I saw that in here.
Landowners will be the same as always. So it's I believe it's a quarter mile.
Okay.
Or, yep, a quarter mile radius from the parcel, or the nearest 10, whichever is more. Yep, so that part's not changing, but we did add that to the Board of Adjustment piece because it was omitted before. I mean, we always noticed that way, but the language wasn't there, and I think it's just nice to have it there because sometimes we do need to reference it. And it's nice if it's for a variance that you reference the Board of Adjustment section.
Cherie?
One comment that came out of the discussion at Board of Adjustment on this was that because of the way meetings are scheduled, it could make it harder for a petitioner if the township isn't prompt in submitting a form and, the petitioner could get delayed or, hung up in their project. And so that the comment was that the township officers be encouraged to, if this goes forward, to be as prompt as possible to make this easier on the petitioners. There's probably a better way to say that, but
Yeah, I mean, there's cases where, depending on
what night?
how the petition comes in, third Thursday or third Friday of the month, maybe one township meeting is like that next week, and, if they miss it, or it was just that week, if they miss it, then you're pushing for the meeting, possibly not having an acknowledgement form from them for that meeting. So it's the same old scheduling, but it's just another meeting for them to keep track of and have to, make sure you have a form for. And technically, the application is not complete until we have that.
Mr. Chair?
Kelly?
So couldn't we make it such that the petitioner needs only to get the form from the township on which the project resides, the proposed project would reside? So they're only required to do that township form for where the project is going to happen, but the county staff will notify all the townships. So if the other townships within a quarter mile have an issue, then it's up to them to come to the meeting. But why make it harder for the petitioner?
We could certainly do that. That's just not what the Township Association requested.
Well,
The
if
Township
they're notified, though,
Did not request that. But yeah, I mean, if that's what you guys think would be a better option, we can consider that.
Yeah.
I think I agree with that, because in Steve's scenario here, if you had 4 different townships, as far as I know, Arlie, most of your townships have a meeting at the same date every month, right?
Within a week.
a lot of
They are, so
They're throughout Whitewater Township is the last
I only had to skip
The
2
last-
that were.
Tuesday, which varies because sometimes there's 5, sometimes there's 4. A lot of them are at the beginning. There's no rhyme or reason to when they have them.
And I should say that that's just my area,
This
so
goes through
that's what.
Wednesday.
But along those lines, though, if we have a 60-day time frame that we need to fit into, and we say the petitioner has to go out and get 4 townships approvals, there's a good chance that we're gonna be not making these 60-day, that's statute, isn't it, 60-day?
That's statute, but we wouldn't consider it complete until we had that. So I
Yeah.
don't think we'd start the 60 days
until you have.
running until you actually have those
Doesn't the
acknowledgement forms.
applicant have some authority on when they want to say they start the clock?
They do, as long as they have a complete application. Yeah, so we review
Because
the
it-
application, we say, yes, it is complete, and therefore, when you submitted it is when the clock starts running. So they can submit anything they want along the way, but it's not complete, and the clock doesn't stop running until we essentially review it and say, yes, it is complete.
But isn't part of the 60-day, the idea of the 60-day rule that the government can't really mire down or slow down the applicant? So, I mean, the applicant could assert, I don't want the government to have control of my project for 120 days.
Yeah, but we're not in control of it until it's complete. I mean, we don't, I mean, for these, we are really flexible with the township acknowledgement forms. We allow them to come in after submittal, after we docket the petition. But technically, it's not complete until those acknowledgement forms are in. So I mean, personally, I don't think that it's a 60-day rule issue.
Mr. Chair?
It might kick back a petition, might potentially, they might not have a complete application for an extra month. It might take them longer.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah. Okay, Lynn.
I think, Mr. Overog, this is a great idea. We need our petitioners to be organized. We need to deal with transparency. And if they apply with one township and it goes to the staff office and the notification process and they see that it does fall on a border of other townships, and we help inform them that it involves more land than they realize or more township authority, it's just part of streamlining the process. I mean, we need to work with transparency. We need to communicate, and we need our petitioners to be organized if they're asking to amend zoning.
Yeah, I mean, whenever they're coming in, we're working with them. We rarely get something that just, drops out of the sky on a Friday afternoon, and we haven't been working with the petitioner. And so they almost always know that, these are the townships I'm going to have to go to. I'm going to have to go to this meeting. And this will just, I mean, the way that it'll roll out is we'll just be saying, you have to go to this, this, and this meeting, or this and this meeting, instead of just the one. And still, the majority of them are just going to be one meeting anyways, because most don't fall on the line, but there's plenty that will eventually.
Mr. Chair.
Okay.
At the township officers meeting, Commissioner Ward spoke to the group and said, you understand by making this recommendation that for an incomplete application that doesn't have all the township acknowledgements, it may slow down a petitioner's procedure, and they may not have their petition considered complete until all of them are in. And they responded in the affirmative that, yes, that was understood.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Kelly.
So what specifically did the township officers ask for?
I think they asked for what we're giving them, what's before you right now. So township acknowledgement form from each of the townships. So they wanted the petitioner to come to their meeting and present their petition for review by the township. Township will consider it and make a recommendation and fill out the form. Form has 3 boxes, so in support, not in support, or no comments. And so that needs to happen. The township acknowledgement form is set up to have that conversation by the board, by the township board, and to make a decision as a board, one way or the other.
So I may have a question.
Steve?
For legal. I'm thinking treating each individually equal and saying you're in the center of the township, you only need 1 form. You're on the corner of the township, so you need 4 forms. Are we treating that citizen the same as we're treating? Usually you have a governing body that you have to answer to, and now I'm thinking you're on the edge of the county. You don't have to go to Wabasha County or Fillmore County or any other county. I mean, you deal with the governing body that you live in, or you're on the edge of the state. You got Iowa. You're on the edge of a township. A township it's a governing body. A county's a governing body. A state is a governing body, and you don't have to. On these other layers, you don't have to go to the neighboring state. You don't have to go to the neighboring county, and you don't have to go to the neighboring township. But here we're setting up potentially something where, if you're in the center of the township, you only need 1 approval. But if you're on the corner of the township, you need 4 approvals. Is that treating everyone equally?
Yes and no. And it depends question. It's not much different than the more rural parcels where you have 5 neighbors and you have to notify them and hopefully talk to your neighbors and try to get their okay on your project. And those in more populated areas where you might have 20 neighbors. It really depends on where everything is located. I think that they're not having to get approvals from the townships. The townships are asking to be made aware of what's going on and have the ability to provide their input when what's happening on that parcel is likely to have an impact on what's going to take place in their township.
Well, that's different.
It's the same as
That's in line with what Kelly is proposing.
Right.
which is different from what's before us now. Because I can see notifying all the other townships.
Yes.
But to expect the petitioner to, I mean, so now if you're in the corner of the township and you've got to make sure you're good friends with all the township officers on all four bodies, because one of them might say, I just want to have the power to stop this person from doing that because something they did 40 years ago. I agree much more with where Kelly's proposal is than what's before us.
Well, I do too, because you still have to you said that we have to notify adjacent landowners.
Notification would be the same as far as
And
property
so
goes.
that doesn't have anything to do with the townships per se. And so I think we're just making more bureaucracy with your proposal.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Just, I'm kind of thinking through, why would a township want the ability to provide input? And, there are some reasons that a township might want that. Let's say you're starting up a UPS shipping hub, okay? That's a wild one, but let's say you're doing that, and you're doing that in Wiscoy Township, but it's right on the edge of Wilson. Well, that has the potential to cause all sorts of traffic issues for, Wilson and Wiscoy. So in that case, makes sense to me, makes a lot of sense for them both to be able to have input. If you're just trying to build a house on less than 40 acres, and you live within a quarter mile of Wilson, yeah, I don't think it's necessary in that case. So I think we need to think this through just a little bit more. I think it would make sense to say this class of CUP, if it's going to cause a transportation issue, if it's going to cause a water quality issue, if it's going to cause some other kind of issue for neighboring townships, yeah, I think that's reasonable. If it's a house on less than 40 acres, then no, I don't think it's reasonable.
Cherie.
There was a situation, I was in a meeting, and the neighboring township, which was very close, didn't know that this particular situation was going forward, and maybe that's even what this grew out of, I don't know. I like the suggestion of the township in which the petitioner resides. It just goes forward the way it is now. And the neighboring township or townships are notified and they can provide input, but the burden isn't on the petitioner to make all those meetings, and there isn't that requirement for the form and stuff. But the township supervisors are informed and they know what's going on, on that line. I think part of it is just being informed. And we couldn't ever foresee all the various things that could come up, so you couldn't make rules for that,
Well, I feel like the neighboring townships have the authority lies with the township that the applicant lives in. And if the neighboring townships want to influence that, they should come to that township meeting. So just sending them notification should be giving them what they're asking for, but to give them authority over that applicant just doesn't feel like we're being fair with that applicant, for that applicant to have 4 approvals instead of 1 if they're in the corner of the township.
But they could be invited to comment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
They're part of the public. I mean,
All right, Kelly, and then I guess I would like to see us either move forward or get out of Dodge.
Okay, so, the township approval or not form is informational to us. As a planning commission, we do not have to do what the planning commission says, if we disagree with it. We certainly should
the
consider.
township
I'm sorry, what did I say?
You said the planning commission.
I'm sorry, what the township says.
We knew what you meant.
Thank you. So maybe we're making too big a deal out of this. I do think they should be notified. But, you know, we don't necessarily have to go with their recommendation if we find that it's not the right recommendation, so. So, yeah.
Okay, so do we have to have a public hearing to put this into place, or can we just,
You will need to, because it's an ordinance change, but we're gonna go back, it's not what's before you, so we're gonna have to go back and doctor that up a little bit, change it,
Draft it.
redraft it, and bring it before you. I don't know, can they schedule a public hearing before, with a proposed, bringing the changes?
Just given everything else that's coming, that maybe we bring it back at the next meeting with the revisions based on the discussion that we had today. At that point, you can decide whether to go forward with a public hearing on the proposed amendments or not.
That would
Do that Board of Adjustment cleanup so that there's at least, a requirement for a township acknowledgement at a minimum anyway, so, if we can incorporate what we're doing tonight, this is the kind of guidance we were hoping for, so.
Absolutely, yep. I
is that
think,
agreeable with the planning commission?
It's on our agenda. Do we need to vote on anything, or?
It was just a discussion on what we were bringing forward.
Right.
to see
No
what
action
timeline.
required.
There's no time limits involved, there's no initiation of anything, just discussion on it.
And so what I'll do is, we'll go back and make the changes based on the comments that we heard here, and bring that back before you, and we'll have the same discussion next month on those. And if it looks agreeable to you, then you can consider scheduling a public hearing at that time for a future meeting.
Can you give us just a brief rundown what your perception is on what we're,
I mean, you're asking my personal opinion. I think the comments that you've made are probably what I would personally, prefer.
can you, in another way, spell it out, what?
He wants a synopsis of it.
Of what I gathered
Yes,
from you?
yes, thank you.
Essentially, that you want, you don't want the requirement for the petitioner to go to the neighboring townships, just to the township where the petition is taking place, and that notification will include neighboring townships that abut the petition if they're on a border. And so we do that right now for like a municipality. If a municipality is within a certain distance of a petition, we would notify the municipality. We don't do that, that's statute, but there's no statute for doing that for a neighboring township. So it'd be very similar to what we do for notification of municipalities, only we'd be doing it for the neighboring township. So I'd write it up.
And for the surrounding townships, that quarter mile,
So you want it, not just the bordering one, then it's within the notification area. If a township falls within that, then notify that township board. Is that correct?
And also the petitioner would be made aware, because the petitioner needs to be responsible for what it is they're trying to change. And I think it's an education process, even though everyone's saying it's too much responsibility for the petitioner. It's a big deal that they know who they affect
Sure.
by their proposed project.
So that could be part of our conversation with them. That wouldn't be in the ordinance, but we would try to remind them that notification is to neighboring townships as well as the people within a quarter mile. So,
Is everybody
I'm comfortable
talked out
with that.
here? Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the county leave the air on evenings when the planning commission meets.
We have a fan. We usually turn on the fan for it.
I just see a lot of people. Okay.
Okay, does somebody want to second this, or we just make the comment?
I think we just make the discussion. Oh, the fan, the air? Get it in the minutes.
It's duly noted.
Anna's got her fan.
Thank you.
So, okay, let's move on to the next item then, if we can. Thank you, Lou.
You bet.
Lou.
The solar ordinance thing, whose responsibility is this?
That would be me.
That's you too, okay.
We're all responsible for it. These guys aren't, they're not free and clear either. So yes, page 43. This one's been a long time coming. As you know, we've heard quite a few large community solar CUP applications, and we've been developing a conditions list that's kind of been in flux and to address some of the issues. But for at least a couple of years now, this has been on our radar to update, but there were a few other updates to the zoning ordinance that we wanted to do first. But now it's time to be looking at this, so the ordinance is before you, that we're just a starting point for discussion. There's a strike-through document. Obviously, the parts that are struck through would be sections of the ordinance that are being proposed to be removed, and the underlined sections are the sections that are additional. If there's no strike-through or underlined, then that's ordinance that's carried, or language that's carried over.
And the blue?
Blue is, that's just second edits that happened, and so the document just tracked them that way.
Okay.
There's no significance to the blue, so just ignore that.
Solar sky space.
And could I ask a question before we, in the agenda, it said, you sought input from planning and from industry professionals and the public. What industry professionals helped you with this, out of curiosity?
Yeah, we approached one of the consultants that was involved with the solar farms down on County Road 1. You remember his name, Kay?
Howard Kruger?
Yeah. I can't remember as I can get it for you.
It's not Howard Kruger?
No. I can get you the name, though, and who he works for and everything. I can send that to all you guys if you want, tomorrow. We also had a couple of people from CERTS that commented, a person from Extension, and then two smaller local contractors, Kritemacher and Tim Golden. So Kritemacher's been doing a lot of the rural systems that have been going on farms, farm sites out in the county, and then Tim does a lot of the residential systems. And then we had the CERTS is more of a regional or state entity, and then, Extension, and then a larger. So we had a kind of a mishmash of different backgrounds and expertise levels.
Thank you.
And then we were, of course, prior to that, for the surety discussion and some of the other points that have now been incorporated into the proposed ordinance changes, we did a grid of about 40 counties. Comparing what they do with things and calling in or looking at their website. And so that was last year.
Yeah.
So that's been embedded into this, but that was a year ago or something.
Yep. I mean, a lot of this language, was a mishmash of the model ordinance, and then other counties' language that they've already come up with to address different issues. So, what else can I tell you at this point? The memo's there. It kind of lays out the some of the major changes. A lot of them aren't new because we've been incorporating them into our conditions, but quite a few of them we've codified now. Not all of them. If you look at the back on page 40. Let's see, page 50, I included in here the conditions list as well, so that you can see which sections of which parts we pulled into the ordinance from the conditions that were there before, and then the ones that we would propose, there's one that we actually propose adding, and then there's a couple that we propose removing that were incorporated into the ordinance. We also left a couple in the conditions. We left the bond amount. There is a requirement in the ordinance for a bond, but we don't get into the specific amount. So we left the amount of the bond in the conditions so that can be more easily changed and depending on the project and the best information we have at the time. We also left stray voltage requirements for testing in the conditions, and you won't find anything in the actual ordinance changes relating to stray voltage. So the conditions part, we're not, there's no changes you need to make, no official motion by you guys to consider that, but it's there just so you can get the whole picture of how we'd have it all work together.
Commissioning.
We also removed a bunch of existing definitions from our ordinance that we found are not used in the ordinance anywhere. There's no reference to solar access space or solar collector. The phrase isn't used anywhere, so we're removing all those definitions.
I'm sorry.
Questions, or how would you like to proceed?
Yes, well, I was reading when you talked about the stray voltage.
So you want me to say that? Say that again?
Can you repeat that?
So the stray voltage piece is going to stay in the conditions list as, not as is. We did actually recommend some changes to that after legal review and a little bit extra consideration. So once we get there, we can talk about that. I don't know if you want to do that now or at a later time, but there were some of that language we didn't feel comfortable with from a legal standpoint. We are still leaving in the requirements of testing, but we're not going to require, what we have proposed here is not requiring that if stray voltage is found on a neighboring property, that property owner is required to change it, which is what's in the condition right now.
Well, and according to Tim Golden, it seems that it has to do with how properly wired everything is.
Right, it doesn't have to do with the CUP. And it seems odd that a neighboring property has a conditional use permit for a solar array, and as a result, the neighboring property has to invest a bunch of money to fix their electrical system. I mean, they very well may want to do that because they apparently have a stray voltage issue, but they shouldn't be compelled to do that.
And actually, we can't find a neighboring property owner with a condition on somebody else's permit.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's what that is. We did not include that, anything related to stray voltage in the ordinance itself.
Pat?
On small scale SES and large scale SES, I see here about the vegetative screening. Is there anything for the larger or small scale about what's under the array per se, that's underneath the?
As far as vegetation, no.
Okay. The reason I bring that up is that I heard some on NPR today that they're finding, I'm not sure where it was in the country, the type of vegetation underneath, if it has a cooling effect.
The panels are more efficient.
Correct.
Yeah, I read that too. Yeah,
Okay.
that was good timing. And yeah, I think that is in relation to community solar or large solar farms. Not to say that it might not also have a benefit to a residential one, but it's just the amount of energy of savings from a small one isn't going to be as much as from a larger one where it's maybe more significant.
Then it could be a recommendation. That could be put in here, a recommendation, not a requirement. I mean, if it's alpha, I don't know what it was, what the foliage was and that type of thing with it, but.
Yeah, for the small ones,
Yeah.
I guess we could talk about that.
Just something to think about.
But we could, usually with ordinances, we usually stray away from like we suggest, the suggestions, and keep it to, this is what's required and what's not required. But we can always, a lot of times what we do in those situations is we have fact sheets. And then we keep those at the counter, and when people are applying for that stuff, we might give them a fact sheet. So like a lot of times in like Shoreland District, they're doing something in the Shoreland District, we might give them a fact sheet from the DNR that's best practice for vegetation management in shore impact zones. And we could potentially do something like that if we have a good publication or some good information.
Cherie?
Okay. I'd like to go back to the beginning. My first question is kind of a definition. We're talking about roof-mounted SES, and the same is for small-scale SES. You say it's designed to supply energy for the primary use. What exactly are you trying to say there for the primary use?
Which number are you under?
Well, this would be
One.
12.3.
Point
Point
one
one.
one.
I went back to the beginning, page 42 on mine.
Roof mounted is at, primary use or permitted accessory uses. Yeah, so for roof mounted, it means that it's essentially like net metering. They fit under the net metering law. So it's primarily for use on site, for that residence. It's not meant for sale, commercially.
Okay, so the point that came to mind for me when I went through this is that I know, say, a half dozen households in Wuskoy Township, they're not connected to the grid. So it's for direct use as opposed to the net metering.
Net metering would also fall under that because net metering is still for primary use
Right.
for the residents.
So I just
that's why-
wondered if there needed to be any,
That's why we wrote it that way,
okay.
is so that it's the primary use. We could, I suppose, supposedly say something about net metering, but I think we wrote it that way so that it would be, net metering would be captured within that.
Okay. And then I had a further question on number 2 on your definition of small-scale SES becomes all ground-mounted systems. I asked Eric about this, that in the past, a development certificate was required for both roof-mounted and ground mount. You dropped the roof mount one, but the ground mounts are still, you still need to get a development
Still asking
certificate.
for a permit for ground mount.
And, there are, in this climate, if people have the space, it's really preferable to do ground mount because of snow removal. But there's a lot of different sizes. I mean, there's little systems like I had out in Wuskoy Valley, and that's ground mount. Should these, should there be a kind of a break point if we're talking smaller systems? Or, because I have seen some farm systems that they're big. They're pretty big, there'd be 20 or 30 kilowatts maybe, as opposed to household or cabin ones that are 2 kilowatts. I'm wondering if there should be any kind of
Power base.
defining of that.
Well, I think the big thing with ground mount is that you're looking at setback distances that need to be verified. So whether it's 30 kilowatts or it's 5 kilowatts, if it's ground mounted, it still needs to meet those standards for setback and
Right.
in some cases I've seen significant grading and filling to accommodate even a small one that would benefit from permit review. But it's something that if you guys want to consider that.
And if someone is just putting in something to power their weekend cabin, that's different than a large whole farm system. So I just wanted to bring that up. And I have a bunch of other questions, but might give other people a chance here.
Yeah, you
I
guys
have
wanna-
a question. Now, I have one easy question about roof mounts, because we considered a solar array and was told that the roof mounts have to be in line with the roof angle. Is that still being upheld?
I don't know. That's beyond my expertise. I don't think it's in, does the ordinance require it?
I was told by Tim Golden that the roof amounts required in town be
Yeah.
in line with the roof angle, which pretty much negated our ability to install.
Yeah, I don't think our ordinance gets into that level of detail.
Okay, thanks.
That might be a building code issue.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's one of those things, we're not building code officials. So, I mean, there may be building code that would require that, but we're just not, contractors might be doing it that way, but our ordinance doesn't necessarily address it.
Thank you.
Cherie?
Oh, good. So I see, another of the policy changes was the removal of the solar sky space provisions, which are a protection for homeowners or owners of solar systems. And why is that?
The language itself was, it is state statute language that allows for that, but we didn't like the requirement, the way it was written. It seemed like a bit of a nightmare to, it was a requirement that we were then saying is a civil matter between property owners and that we weren't going to enforce. That's the way it was written. Essentially, gives you the state statute language, this is what's required, and then at the bottom it says, if you have issues with this provision, take it up with your attorney, and, it's a civil matter that the county isn't going to get involved with.
So under definitions,
We were left wondering why it was there.
which one is the state statute? I mean, there's solar access space, there's solar sky space, there's solar sky space easement. Which one is the state statute?
I mean, all those are in our ordinance. I don't know where they come from, but they're not used in our ordinance, so. The language itself is on page 48, I think. And that's taken from state statute, a lot of it, but not exactly word for word. And then it says, in the second paragraph there on page 48, violation of the standard shall constitute a private nuisance, and any owner or occupant whose solar energy system is shaded because of such violation, so that performance of the system is impaired, may have in tort for damages sustained thereby, and may have such nuisance abated. But that's a civil matter, not a county issue.
The problem that we run into with that one is that in a different place in our ordinance, it says you violate any of these provisions and we can cite you for a misdemeanor, the county can come after you. And in fact, there's a way that you can force the county to enforce this ordinance. But then contradictory, we have this that says, except for in this one place where it's civil, so we're not gonna do anything.
Is that what in tort means? It's civil?
It would be civil, yes. A tort is a civil action.
Okay.
So wrong between one person and another.
I guess my concern with this would be that, it's a considerable expense that people go to do this, and it would be unfortunate if, then it no longer was effective because neighbors planted a windbreak, decided they didn't like the way it looked, and so they planted a windbreak, and then this person's, investment is made nil.
I believe the language does still exist in state statute, so there is still that private action between the neighbors where they can have, we're just not putting it in our ordinance because it's nothing we can enforce.
The statute and the ability of them to seek remedy through the courts is still there.
Aren't we able to be more stringent than state statute?
We are, and with this, we were including what was in state statute. We were just saying that it's there, here's what the rules are, we're just not gonna enforce it. It's between you and your neighbor. And we shouldn't have things like that in our zoning ordinance. We're either gonna enforce what's in our ordinance or it's not there.
Yeah,
Well,
I'll
why
say
don't we
when
make
were-
something, perhaps we could make it something that could be enforceable, and thereby making it a stricter standard than Minnesota State is in this particular case.
In all the ordinances that we review, this does not show up in any other county ordinances. We're the only one, to my knowledge, that has this currently. And it's always kind of a point of curiosity for others that find out that we have that. So it's odd that we have it in our ordinance. And I'll just say that it's, it's never been something that's been used. But, if you wanted to look into that, we can look into it. If the planning commission wants to.
Sounds like you already have.
We'd also have to look at state statute if we're enabled to do that, or if it's, if it's something that is only really statutorily allowed through civil. So.
Okay,
The other factor that might play into that is whether or not that kind of enforcement or observation, or if somebody generates a complaint about it, can be observed from, a township road, a county road, or that kind of thing. If something is happening on your property line, it has to be enforceable by the department without, what comes to mind is with small dog kennels, a registration of 9 to 12 dogs with an entity that the department would never see, that we wouldn't have any way of knowing whether or not compliance in the conditions would be met. So when we write it up, we'll always keep in mind, is that something we would be able to keep? So like the 30,000 for a surety bond, some were 50, many were 25, so that's where that number came from. Slightly above the 25, but not as much as the outlier that was 50 kind of thing. These are all just guidance and pieces of information for the use of the planning commission.
is there anything in this proposal about locating a large solar farm on ag land?
Agricultural preservation, no, we have not included that in the ordinance.
I think we should.
Okay.
Because we keep nickel-diming ourselves to death by coming up with an exception every time somebody applies for a CUP, and it's kind of ironic to me, Vince and I were talking about this before this meeting tonight, that everybody says, well, I can afford to pay this much for land because they're not making it anymore. Well, that's probably true, but since it is true, and we keep nickel-diming ourselves to death, pretty soon we won't have any land left to grow food on. Stephanie.
Mr. Chair, I think some of those concerns would be addressed by the need for a conditional use permit in order to have a large scale, because that would be the criteria that have to be addressed. Things like the reasonably related to the overall needs of the county, consistent with the purpose of the zoning ordinance, in conformance with the comprehensive plan. That's where those concerns would come into play, as opposed to the newly revised ordinance itself.
I see. I think, Arlie, did you understand that?
I did.
Okay, I agree with Arlie.
Yes, my thought is, if it's on good agricultural land, we're not letting houses or buildings put on there, for the most part. Why are we doing solar farms? There's plenty, there's one coming up, I'm not gonna say who, what, where, but, the guy renting the land, that's his best land he's got, renting, and not too far away, there's twice the size of an old pasture, and the reason they didn't want to do that is because it would cut into their profit, the solar company said. Like, well, we've, and it's right up to the road, so what's gonna happen when the snow blows and there's gonna be one big ass drift there? I can just about guarantee I've lived there all my life with all them solar panels there.
Then you have your traffic hazard or congestion criteria, where that would be a concern.
Yep.
So the taking ag land out of production would be related to the comprehensive plan analysis, the zoning ordinance analysis. So the criteria that are required to issue a conditional use permit, you can address all of those concerns there.
At the permit
It doesn't
time.
need to be written into the solar ordinance itself, because the solar ordinance itself is really just standards and requirements. Or if one's gonna be granted, here's what must be met. The criteria are whether or not it should.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
it's the conditions we do with every CUP. And those conditions would be how we evaluate a solar petition, just like any other petition. So it's up to us to say yes or no, this is using prime soil or not.
Yeah,
and
but
it shouldn't be using.
what Arlie's talking about though is having a standard in the ordinance similar to what we have for dwellings, an ag preservation's ordinance standard.
Right, because on the previous applications for CUPs for solar farms, this has not been brought up. And I presume that from what Stephanie said, it should have been, but it wasn't, because it isn't in there.
Well, what standards are you talking about?
Well, I think what Arlie's talking about is having something that, there's different ways of addressing that type of an issue. There's, there's density standards that you could have, you could look at a soil standards similar to what we have for dwellings. I don't think that would work for solar. I don't think it works very well for dwellings. But we could look at something along those lines. Ag preservation in that sense is, there's not a lot of examples to go on. I watched a webinar on Monday on that exact subject, and it was some folks from New York State talking about ag preservation and solar farms out there. And they mainly talked about the concerns they had for large solar farms and prime soil and prime ag land. And they also talked about the differences between different types of development and, the type of development that solar is, because it doesn't have the same impacts as like a urban development or residential development where you're actually, digging up soils, you're putting down foundations, you're paving roads. A solar farm is largely keeping those soils intact. It can be more easily decommissioned and restored. But regardless, there's a lot of concern about the number of acres that are still being removed now, and for how long, that might be for. I mean, a lot of these large ones, they might have a 20, 30-year shelf life, but that doesn't mean that that's the end of the project. I mean, there could be a solar farm there for many, many years to come. So there is concern out there about ag preservation and solar development. But like I said, they were pretty light on specific solutions for local governments. So we're kind of left with, if you're doing something like that, is looking more like a soil-based standard or a density standard. Kind of like what we used to have for homes, 1 per quarter. You could do, a certain number of acres per section. I don't know. I mean, it would take quite a bit more analysis and thought to go down that road.
Arlie?
I got a question. I don't know if we've ever talked about it, but what's the tax base when it goes from farmland to solar farm? Is there any change?
I'm not sure. That would be a question for, I don't know if anybody, if you know, but I think there is a change. I can't remember, Eric, have you, Hacken sent something around a while back.
It goes up.
In the large raises.
But I think there's a lag of some sort. Yeah, it was, yeah, it'd be something we could look at and have Steve downstairs provide some information.
Kay, do you still have a comment, or?
No, but, well, yes, I do, Mr. Chair, sorry. The density issue is also predicated on what the line capacities are for the different electrical providers, because that is not just an even playing field. So we are seeing concentrations in certain areas being requested because of capacity. At some point, that capacity can be filled, and then it won't be just an endless supply that, you know, an ordinance might be trying to prevent via a density thing that could be naturally prevented because of the line capacity. So there's a lot of moving parts with this. This is just an attempt to tweak the ordinance to get it closer to what a lot of the points that have been made in previous discussions with the planning commission.
So if I may, to try to allay the concern, and I think it's a valid concern, so we don't have like condition or finding of fact number 4 for a solar array? Is that what you're telling me? Which is the proposed lot does not consist of class 4 through class 7 soils, or it consists of less than 40%. Is that not one of the conditions we do for a solar array?
That's correct. We do not have that because right now the solar are being reviewed under the standard conditions. And the soil was custom inserted for the residential densities to put another house on less than 40.
Okay. I think it would make sense to change those standards so that we do that.
Okay.
And I'm sure all of you don't need me to say this, just a point of discussion. You know, if you're building a house on something, you're taking it out of production on prime soils permanently.
That's what he was saying, yeah.
In between the solar rows, right now, deep-rooted perennials such as prairie plants, or depending on how much shade, other kinds of non-invasive perennials are being planted that have a positive impact on soil rejuvenation and soil organic matter content. If you're taking something out of production for 30 years, my uncle's sandy soil on the border with South Dakota was in the CRP program for as long as he possibly could arrange it, because it was the rottenest area on his farm for production. But eventually, it went back into production, because then those deeper rooted plants had provided enough organic matter to make it worth putting it back in the marketplace. So, just anyway, something, personal observation, but we do review species mix. A lot of these folks are working with some of our businesses that have wildflower seed available, and with the understanding that it can be brought back into agricultural use, depending on what the property owner wants to do with their land and how they get income from it.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I was going to mention the same thing. Typically, it's a farmer that has depleted soil that's considering the solar.
From my observation, it's typically the farmer that has a depleted bank account. It doesn't have anything to do with his soil.
If you would like, we can bring back some information, though. I mean, I think it would be valuable to look at some of the service areas that Excel has and what those capacities are, so you can kind of see where the pressure is going for solar. I think that'd be an important piece of information to have if you're going to talk about ag preservation, especially if you're looking at standards, because then you know how much the capacity is. And you know, like Kay said, it is limited by that. So there's natural limiting conditions to how many acres could potentially be developed. So.
I think that would be interesting. I would also be, some of us in Winona County are not covered by Excel. So it would be nice to have that same information available from My Energy. which is the other provider. Tri-County, basically.
Eventually, you might end up, the co-ops might be able to participate in the community solar program, and then it would open up at that point, so. I don't know.
At this point, are we going to try and take another baby step here, or are we gonna just do like we've done basically for the last 3 years and keep on circling the wagons?
Well, it's at your pleasure how you would like to proceed. If you want more information, let us know what that is. If you would like to move forward, look at public hearing, I guess would be the next step if you're comfortable with the language. If you want another month to review and come back and discuss again, we can do that.
I guess, Eugene, for your concern about taking land out of agricultural, it would be good to know how much capacity there is left that isn't being served by these solar farms. Because then, if you know it's not much, then you know that there won't be much more land taken out of agricultural, for agricultural purposes. So that, I think that would be a good point of interest for us.
We can do that.
But isn't that just given the infrastructure that exists presently? I mean, if the demand is there for the solar product, there's nothing to say that an electrical company can't put in capacity for something somewhere else, right?
It's true. Yep, they can upgrade.
I mean, so we could never guess that number is what I'm saying. We can find out what the capacity is presently, but that doesn't really stop capacity from being increased.
Mr. Chair?
Arlie?
What I found out, if this new solar farm goes on up by my place, it'll be 4 of them within a half mile as the crow flies. If I wanted to put a small solar farm in and sell some of it back to the power company, according to the guy from Excel, he says, ain't gonna happen. It'll be full, unless they build a new substation back on the ridge there. Which, that's fine. I don't have a problem with solar. I don't see why they have to take it out of farmland where there's plenty of other land available. And the answer the power company gave me was not what the township wanted to hear. But that's all.
Well, do we want to have a public hearing, or what do we want to do? Because we've talked a long time, but we haven't gone very far.
Could we combine the new information and the new language with a public hearing?
I would not recommend that, because if you're talking about revising the language because you're not sure that's what you want to put forward to a public hearing.
Right.
You don't want to be changing the language as part of the public hearing usually.
At this point, I have a request for information on land values from the assessor's office. And then some information from the Excel service areas and capacity. So we could bring that back next month and present that. And you can review this in the meantime. If you have questions, we can discuss at that time. And then, if you feel comfortable with it, or we'll move on from there.
When you say land values, are you also including tax? Okay.
Yeah, that would be the assessed value, so how they assess it for taxes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And too, I think, Kelly's earlier point, we will compare some of state current definitions with, what was taken out in case something else should be, like solar easement needs to be inserted, that kind of thing. So we'll do a quick double check with those as well, because that was another point that was brought up.
Sounds good.
Okay, does that satisfy people, or?
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, we'd put those revisions in and then come back and get the final stamp before a public hearing?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
So do you need a motion on that, Jane?
Don't ask me, ask Stephanie.
Not at this point. We'll go back, bring you the information you've asked for, and then if there's revisions that need to take place at the next meeting, then we'll take care of that then.
You're off the hook.
But that, if we need more revisions, then do we have to postpone a public hearing another month?
Not necessarily. It depends on the complexity of your revisions. If it's just some basic things or adding some language that we talk about then, I can put that together as we talk about it, and you can schedule a public hearing on it for whenever you choose. If it's a complete overhaul of some things where you're gonna wanna come back and talk about what the recommendation is, then you would push it a little bit further.
Is there any sense of urgency? I mean, is there some reason we need to do it sooner than later?
Is there any solar farms on the agenda coming up?
Next month.
And I guess just from I'm thinking taxpayer standpoint, the longer it's belabored in staff's time, we keep coming back. If we can get to an end, staff doesn't have to continue to
We'll move
go
on to
back
the
and
next.
go back and go over
Sure.
3 more questions every month. And then set up another time for it to be on. So there's some efficiencies in being able to move forward.
Thank you for your work on this, Lou.
Yeah, you're welcome. And like I said, if things come up as you're like in between now and then, feel free to let us know if you have concerns, because then we can try to address them and have something for you at the next meeting.
Okay. Board of Adjustment update. We maybe already have it.
Well, you have part of it. You do know that the variance for the Roths was approved. Then there was a second petition heard, also in Saratoga Township. Dennis and Penny Steinhorst, a variance to allow a 42-foot rear yard setback and shed instead of the required 50-foot pursuant to Chapter 10.4.7, and that also was approved.
Okay.
It was a little confusing, but we did get through it.
Okay, then Steve, I guess County Board.
County Board reviewed the Walsh application and against the Planning Commission's recommendations, approved the application.
Okay.
Tell us more.
Commissioner Olson, when it came his turn to pull items from consent agenda, which is where this was, I guess I'd have to say in his defense, the county board picks up our packet, looks at it, and if the county board wasn't doing their job, they just send it through on consent business and no discussion would be had. Mr. Olson looked at it, and the way we had submitted it, and I guess I kind of quizzed legal on it at the end of our last meeting, our planning commission meeting, was we had 19 criteria, 18 of which all pointed to approve the petition, and one that said the soils aren't right. So Greg Olson, looking at that, said, why is all the information pointing to that? We didn't go through the 19 points that were made by staff. We just said we're going to approve the petition and include all these points of approval. So I think it was kind of hard for the county board. I voted with the planning commission, and so did Marcia Ward. I voted to deny the permit because I voted with the planning commission last month. But I don't know, if we send something forward with a mixed signal, I guess the county board is probably going to look at it and make their own conclusion. We said deny it, but here's 18 reasons to approve it. That's what we sent forward, right?
Council?
Mr. Chair, just for clarification, there were in fact 3 of the criteria that were identified as not met, not 1.
And the,
And
No, my packet had 19.
What about the impaired stream and the proximity to the trout, the protected waters?
Yeah, that was in our packet. I mean, yeah, so, your argument should be with the three commissioners that approved it,
just-
not with me.
No, I'm not. I'm just
voted with
curious
you.
how it played out. I'm just curious how it got reversed.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I didn't attend the county board meeting, so I don't know what took place, but I did read the article in the paper, and the point that they made in I think it was the Winona Daily News coverage of it, was that we approve these all the time, why aren't we approving this one? And I just go back to each and every CUP, it should be treated on its own merit, and we all need to remember that. And I think there is growing concern among the agricultural community that we're not living up to our comprehensive land use plan, which says to preserve agricultural land. So I think that was the primary concern of the Planning Commission, and I think we should focus less on, well, we did it for Joe, why can't we do it for Sam? What we really need to focus on is, are we consistent with our county comprehensive land use plan? So, just a statement.
Thank you. Arlie, would you like to say anything at this point?
Motion has been made to adjourn here.
Well, I have something that I would like to say.
Okay.
I knew you would.
You all received a copy of what Mark Clark stated because he couldn't be here tonight. I guess Mark, and I presume I'm speaking with Arlie's approval, Arlie and I both or all were very disappointed at the county board's decision because we conducted a public hearing. All of the adjoining landowners had a chance to speak. None of them were even lukewarm in favor of this that attended the meeting. And I live very close to this piece of property, and I think if we would have actually examined, we would have found more than 3 of the criteria that were not met. Now, motion was made by Mark after he stated that this was on agricultural land that was in the applicant's proposal stated was not agricultural land, that we had seen enough, and this was passed unanimously. And I guess it irks at least us 3 quite heavily that we went to the time, and I personally spent 10 hours on this project, and then be completely ignored on a technicality. And I think Steve mentioned this a couple meetings ago, that we're not getting rich sitting up here for this evening, so we would appreciate a little more in-depth analysis before you go against our recommendation. Thank you.
I'd like to add to that too, Eugene, because I actually went and visited the site. And I think that would maybe help all of us make better decisions about what's being proposed with many of the dockets that come up. But there were carcasses of calves along the bank of that stream where he said it wasn't used for agriculture, and there were fields within the dirt road that you had to access to go look at the parcels. So Eugene's right, there wasn't even truthful statements made in the proposal.
Okay, now do you still wish to adjourn the meeting?
Yes, I move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, Lynn moved to adjourn the meeting and Kelly seconded it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.